Uh-oh, we lost our host.
Whoa, now. Give him a moment.
Well, everybody, our normal host for the week has popped off somewhere. I'm sure he'll be back. But this is
sorry.
No.
Hey, sorry. I went off a little bit. I needed to do a quick upgrade since we're going to have some extra guests today. So
Okay.
I upgraded the plan to the one that should let me put more extra people on stage.
Excellent.
So hello, everyone. I was saying off stage that no one heard. Welcome to our April 26th live stream. Last one of this month. April shower, spring, May flowers, right? And we've had a little bit of showers here. I don't know about you guys. So how's everyone doing?
What Mayflowers bring?
They bring immigrants.
Yes, exactly.
Back on topic.
Yes. So for our discussion today, we're going to continue on what we did with last week in regard to Alex's presentation of his kind of multi-pronged approach to proving the existence of God. However, hold on, it's been raining for 10 hours for your average atheist, and luckily he's an atheist because the rain stops at 10 hours. It doesn't keep going for 40 days, so he'll be fine. Anyway, so last week we had a little bit of discussion that we were going to just skip, but then Blarg did want to address some of the comments that others, including Chard or Richard, was making. Someone dropped off. Who did we lose? Oh, Blarg. I think Chard scared him off.
Oh, I did? That's unfortunate.
Yeah. All right. Well, Blarg is back. So before we get to Alex's second part, the second prong of his proof of God, which is the moral knowledge argument, I should say, we'll have Blarg and Chard maybe go a little bit on about some of the open items from last week's discussion. So
my
I don't know who wanted to start.
My questions are mostly for Alex, but and it's 3 a.m. for me, so I can't stay for too long. But Blarg, go ahead.
Well, no, then let's have. Blarg, go ahead then. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Richard, get into it. We'll prioritise you first, being that's a shitty time to be getting up to talk to us, and wow, that's very much appreciated that you take that out.
I haven't gone to bed yet.
I wouldn't say this YouTube stream is worth staying up to 3 a.m. But thank you for saying
it's all good and fun.
No, go for it.
I'll let you go first, Dave.
Yes, it is.
Hey, Richard.
Hi. So my question last week was touching upon your first opening argument, right? With the values for the quote-unquote constants of the universe. And so on a fine-tuning argument, it is accepted that these constants could be different. But my question there is, do we know enough of them to know that they can be different, or are they just static? Like, is there a possibility that they can only be one way?
Yeah, and you didn't like my response about the fact that particle physicists can treat them as varying and calculate their resultant.
Right, you can use them as variables. Like, you can use different values in your calculations, but that doesn't tell us much about what they actually could be.
I would think, yeah, and it looked like my comment that I made, I don't know, disappeared or something. But so I think like nomological possibility is at least some evidence of metaphysical possibility, all else equal. And so given that like, yeah, I guess like the constants being different is a nomological possibility. I would think that's like some evidence of metaphysical possibility. And then conceivability would also be like, I think at least some evidence of possibility. Maybe it's not a strict entailment or something like that, but yeah, I think those are at least evidential considerations favoring the possibility of it being different. What do you think about that?
No, I agree. Like, for me, yes, sure, there are some evidence, but like, I would not put a lot of credence on conceivability as entailing some metaphysical possibility. It's like you can conceive of a lot of things without them actually being metaphysically possible. But like some counterexample would be like you cannot even conceive of a married bachelor because there's a logical impossibility there. But you can conceive of a lot of things that are at face value, they seem metaphysically possible, but it's way harder to determine if something is metaphysically possible or not than it is to determine if something is logically possible or not. I just don't put that much credence in conceivability.
What are some good counterexamples? Like you know, mathematical truths, I don't know, I guess like I consider like maybe mathematical truths are conceivably false.
Are they?
But you know, I don't know. I guess that's
Wait,
like pretty
how can it
controversial.
be? How can it be false? What's an example?
It really depends on how you view maths. You can view them as strict logicals. Like there's no way for 1 + 1 to be anything other than 2 because there's a logical entailment there. But if you don't view them as such, then you could conceive them as different.
Yeah,
You also
like
have
Terence
the
Howard.
situation. You also have the situation where you develop an equation to describe a situation that doesn't give the answer that is clearly it needs to. So while the mathematics might be correct, the modeling of the situation is not.
Yeah, I agree.
Which happens all the time. I would, as I think I mentioned last time. Oh, before I get to that, Alex, your comment is in that thread. It just might have been what we call ghosted. So in order to see it, you have to sort the comment section by newest first, and then all of the comments which kind of are otherwise ghosted are visible.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
yeah, I see that you've got a comment there as the first reply to Richard's. So.
Oh, I completely missed your comment, Alex. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I only responded to blog and I didn't see your comment at all.
Okay.
That's unfortunate.
So yeah, that'd be why you didn't see it too. It's ghosted.
I see.
A lot of my comments get ghosted as well. It's freaking annoying. It's YouTube's. It's a change of process that YouTube took to deal with bots and various people. They don't make any indication that anything went wrong with the posting. They don't delete it. They don't remove it. It just gets hidden, and it just wraps everyone up. It's annoying as hell. So, and the bigger your comment, the more likely it is to get ghosted. And if it has any unusual terms in, or any sort of triggering terms in there, that it's got a really good chance of being ghosted. So
it's unfortunate that there's a proportionality with length or correlation.
Yeah. So sometimes what you can do is you can. It might not always just be that there's proportional to length. It just might be that the more of them the more words you put, the more likely you are to hit one of those words that they decide, oh, I'm ghosting with that one. So sometimes I've had to break posts into like 5 pieces and then find the damn word that is the one that's causing the problem. It's just annoying. But anyhow, back to the topic at hand. I was going to say last week, Richard, that I'd pop in and defend Alex's position here slightly from your question, in so much as my take is that even if it turns out that the numbers cannot be any other value, that's still a thing that requires an explanation. So yeah. So that's a thing. So if we go and say, okay, well, they can take any value, that requires less of an explanation than it can take a specific value.
Really?
Or a specific range, because any value means there's no constraint upon that value. Nothing's constraining it. If there's a constraint of some sort, that constraint really begs for an explanation for why the constraint exists. Where's it coming from? So
it could be brute facts suck generally, but you could say that there's something intrinsic to reality that puts restraints to it, but like brute facts are kind of boring. So
yeah, they don't get you very
my
far.
My overall point is not really to debunk a fine-tuning argument, because I'm not really interested in debunking stuff. It's more so that be cautious. Like, I think we should be agnostic on the values of these constants and not just be really sure that they can be different or that they cannot be different. I think we should be like, well, they could be or they could not be. Like, I think the more parsimonious stance is to say that we don't know. Like, we should be agnostic.
Yeah, well, that's not a point that is really taken by the scientists who are doing the calculation. They are agnostic as well. They just do the calculation and see what the answer is, see what that tells us. They're not saying that it could be that value. They're just saying that, if we do the calculation and we make these assumptions, this is what we get. Does that tell us anything interesting?
Yeah. No, I know what they do. It's just more so I'm thinking about the argument and not really what the scientists are doing. But that's it. That's all I have for Alex's last week. Do you want to move on to morality?
Yep, we can do that.
Yeah. There was a fair bit of leftover stuff from in the discussion in the chat section from last week, but I'd be happy to move us on to the next comment. No, I was just saying I'd be happy to move us on to the next. We'll move along.
Let me give you just at least a few minutes to kind of go over your comments on that before we go on.
No worries. Okay, hang on. I'll just pop back. There were a couple of things, like, for example, I went and dug up some of the papers by the person that Alex had cited along the way, and it was interesting. The guy seems like a relatively good scientist, but there's a few little issues I sort of found. One is that he tends to only publish solo papers, which I tend to notice that people who publish solo papers only are ones who are a little bit more out there in what they're saying. So I'd be a little more concerned about solo papers than large group papers. It's not to say anything he's done is wrong. It's just that comes up as a small red flag.
Are you talking about his specifically philosophy papers? Because those are usually more commonly solo authored, but then his scientific ones are more like collaborative.
Blarg, you there? I think we may have lost Blarg.
Oh, shit.
Am I still here, Kenny? Can you hear me?
There we go.
Yeah.
We hear you now, yeah.
That's a little bit annoying, because I went over to the thing and it dropped off my, paused the browser Just let me know
for a
if I
second
drop
there,
out.
it looked like Alex had finally stunned one of us into silence.
As I tend to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, so that's not a big issue. I'm not trying to say that Dr. Barnes is wrong per se in what he's doing. It's just something I noted. I did have a couple of
what was his name?
Dr. Luke A. Barnes.
Oh, Luke. Okay.
Yeah. So he's got a couple of papers that I looked through. One called "A Reasonable Little Question: A Formulation of the Fine-Tuning Argument."
Yeah,
from
if you look at his
2019.
philosophy papers, they're like sole author, and then like all of his scientific papers look like pretty standard collaborative type work, which is normal for like philosophy versus physics.
We seem to have
Mark,
connected.
move
Okay.
over to the other tab
probably what
again.
happened.
I did make the comment, say, let's just grant. So he made a conclusion at the end of that paper saying fine-tuning of the universe for life shows that, according to the best physical theories we have, naturalism is overwhelmingly expects a dead universe. And I think that's really where you were getting to as well, wasn't it, Alex? That's your point. And so, yeah, I'd made a note saying that, it's let's just grant that's true. But where I had I had two large sort of problems there. One is that there's no similar analysis for the probability of a non-natural cause. We just go along and we put in this probability and say, well, this is the probability for a natural cause. It's overwhelmingly low. But then we just leave it at that. Nobody ever goes to the next step and say, okay, well, if we compare that against the non-natural cause, what's the probability that the non-natural cause is the
Yeah, I think I give
Lark.
reasons to think that the probability was much less. You just don't do you don't do the same analysis as you would for the particle physics constant distribution, because we're not doing a naturalistic analysis, so we would not do the same type of assessment. But you like give reasons, and I like think there's good reasons to think theism would have produce a life permitting universe.
Yeah, sorry, tilting. It's probably right that I keep getting cut out because of the way this stupid Android tablet works. When I go over to look at the YouTube app, it puts the other one on hold, so that's a little bit annoying. But what I was going to say is, it is possible to consider that calculation for God, or whatever you want to have, from a sort of a logical perspective, and say, well, we don't know what God's made of, but there must be, some unit of thought that has to be stacked together in some form to create the being that the near infinite being that is required to be the God that then went along to create the universe. And the chance of putting all of the pieces of that mind together from whatever these particles of thought are is that's near infinitely improbable if you approach it from that angle.
Why should we think that God's made of particles of thought as opposed to simple, which is like the standard theory that usually everybody believes, like unembodied mind, rather than like some physical constituted thing?
Well, it doesn't have to be a physical constituted thing, but
or a constituted thing at all.
Yeah, but in order for thoughts to exist, there must be thoughts. That must be a thing of some sort, whether it's embodied or unembodied. there must be some element of a thought is a thing, no matter what you decide it's made out of, whether it's some physical component or set of components, or whether it's some sort of magical ether or something. But it's an element of a thing. So even if we grant that the thoughts aren't made of anything, the thoughts still need to be there in order to create the mind. So the mind is an enormous number of thoughts, an infinite number of thoughts, the argument would have, and to have all of those thoughts put out in that sort of form, you would.
I don't think thoughts would create a mind by constitution, but like a mind would generate thoughts. I am going to be talking about the kind of like fundamental aspect of theism and how you get the properties of theism. So we might jump into the first part of my presentation, which is kind of like, what is the fundamental theory of theism a little bit.
Yeah, we can jump over that in a sec. The other thing I was going to say is that the assumption, or that conclusion from Dr. Barnes, that it's overwhelmingly expects a dead universe, that's a little bit like a person who goes and plays a single game of the lottery overwhelmingly expects not to win the prize, the major prize. But someone always wins the major prize, or the major prize gets won all the time, and that's because there's lots of tickets sold. So, an overwhelmingly low probability of a universe existing that has life in it is in no way a problem for pretty much any of the multiverse theorems that you can consider. It just doesn't cause a problem at all. Add sufficient multiverses, and the probability of a universe like ours becomes 1. So
I think I responded to this in the last weekend in the comments, so I'd rather just move on to this presentation.
Yeah, so that's a thing that people never really seem to sort of get around, that a multiverse is. So you said a multiverse is overwhelmingly more complex, but I responded to say that doesn't actually. That there's no reason for that to hold true.
I mean, just ask the people trying to design multiverse theories that actually work, and it's extremely difficult. Well,
there's a multiverse theory that has a multiverse that just comes out of the universe that we're in. Every time a black hole is created, a new universe forms. A singularity at the center of that black hole is the white hole at the beginning of the next universe. And entropy is filtered by the event horizon. So it doesn't require any more complexity than the existing universe we're in to generate an infinite number of universes going out into the future. So, but anyway, I'll let you move on to your new presentation, and so we can give it a good shakedown.
I mean, I think we're kind of in the same position we were at the end of last stream, where there are common arguments against the fine tuning argument, but if the other side doesn't accept it, it's not going to go anywhere. But hopefully, with the moral argument, maybe there'll be a little more, I guess, latitude on either side. So, why don't you go ahead, Alex?
I suspect there will be even less latitude because
well, not with that attitude. I think we have to start with an open mind.
We're not here. We're gonna listen. We're good.
Yes. All right. Cool. So
I'm mostly harmless. You know that.
So
keyword mostly.
Yeah. All right, so looking at moral knowledge, moral agency, I think this supports God's existence. The answer is fine-tuning is evidence of God. That's what the whole argument is. Okay, so moral knowledge argument for God's existence. let's see. All right, so just again, starting with definitions here, so we're all on the same page. Theism. This theory says that there exists a necessary, personal, all-good, all-knowing, all-powerful creator of the universe. So triomni being. For naturalism, there is no supernatural entities. On the other hand, and then usually something about following the sciences and their method and stuff like that. Okay, so where does this definition kind of come from?
By the way, naturalism doesn't specifically say. I guess naturalism does, but I mean, for most scientists, they're using materialism, right? Not naturalism, methodological materialism, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
here I'm meaning to contrast like a metaphysical like naturalism, not just like methodological. Yeah. So most scientists will follow methodological naturalism in doing scientific method type stuff. But here I mean that this would kind of rule out the existence of God, something that like would I guess explicitly rule out the existence of God or other entities kind of like that.
But the point is, science doesn't say that there's no God, right? It doesn't
Right,
speak
yes.
to it.
This is like a metaphysical hypothesis theory. Yeah. Not a scientific one. Yes. So, okay, just kind of a starting point for this understanding of theism with perfect being theology. So this is like classical theism has like goes back for forever in our understanding of God, or at least a very long time. The very concept of God is understood as the greatest possible being. So that is the understanding is that like this is the very concept of the thing that we call God, is that he is the greatest possible being. And then there might be like different conceptions. So the starting point is there's like this one fundamental property, name it perfection or maximal greatness or something like that. And then, so if you want to figure out like what the greatest possible being is like, you need to kind of do an analysis on like what is perfection or greatness, and take that to its like, logical metaphysical implications. So if something is like the greatest possible thing, then you're gonna get these other properties from it for free, essentially. So it is greater if you know more, if you can do more things, and if you're like morally better. These are kind of great making properties. If you exist in more possible worlds, if it's essential to your nature to know all things and to be able to do all things, this is a great making property. So you end up with like necessary and essentially all-knowing and all-powerful, all-good type of entity, starting from this starting point, which is a simple fundamental starting point, just one fundamental property, and the rest of these things kind of follow from that. You get these uniform properties and motivational structure based on that. So this is kind of a workhorse for kind of understanding the nature of God from a somewhat simple starting point. So it's simpler to have no limits, no non-logical limits on God's nature. So you'd end up with the omni properties. So that's kind of where this starting point for theism is, and where this definition is usually kind of derived from.
Just a question.
Yes.
For example, why is all good necessarily a component of a greatest possible being, or an element of greatness in its own right? So it's a more general question for all of it, but in a lot of ways, and I'm sure this argument has been made a lot of times, but why would it seems like these elements are structured in such a way as to achieve the conclusion of a biblical God, rather than for them to be naturally forming.
Well, and let me just give an example here, right? For all good being kind of part of this perfect, greatest possible thing, because maybe the greatest possible thing is for you to be, perfectly good as well as perfectly evil, right? Where you are not constricted by some, I guess, more of an anthropomorphic idea of good. So if we say that it's not constrained by an anthropomorphic idea of good, then what you say good may be kind of meaningless to us. So, just to add on to what Blarg would say.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So by constraining it to be all good, you're constraining the being in a way that is good, that we like. But why would that make it great? Wouldn't it be greater if it doesn't have the constraint?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't think that being evil is great.
Well, evil in what we think is evil.
Yeah, I would still agree with that. I don't think it is like, a great making.
Yeah, but let's just assume that being evil is bad. But by being constrained, I can imagine a being that is greater than a constrained being, and that's a being that is not constrained by anything. So basically, we get down to this argument about what does great mean. Does great mean great for us, or does great mean unconstrained by anything? Those give two different answers for whether all good is an element of greatness.
Yeah, so I guess that's more a question of moral freedom or just freedom, is that part of greatness? And that's definitely an interesting question, and things people have debated about, like the coherence between the omni properties. And I think Wielenberg, I like Wielenberg's definition of this is like a potential conflict between omnipotence and like God's what's the term for it? But where he like can't do wrong, impeccability, I guess. Anyway, that's more like Jesus, but okay. But yeah, so I guess like I think the best way to analyze omnipotence is not ability to do like anything whatsoever. It's ability to do anything where not being able to do that thing would constitute a lack in some way. And so like ability to do evil, for example, like it's clearly pretty easy to just like move my finger in this way and like shoot someone. That's like it doesn't require a whole lot of power. So being constrained such that it's impossible for me to do an evil act, for example, like shooting someone for no good reason, is not really the interesting type of constraint that I think is worrisome for this type of conception of God about greatness. So that type of freedom, I think isn't the most concerning.
Because essentially, as I noted, it really does seem like these elements are selected specifically to get to the conclusion that that God exists, rather than forming naturally. Because you define God, the God that that people conceive of these days, not necessarily the God that's written into the Bible, but the God that they sort of imagine. You have these characteristics of it. You define those as the elements of greatness, and therefore you get the God of the Bible as your, the God you conceive of as the answer. But you're already starting from the answer in your definition of greatness.
I mean, it's interesting that you say that, this is meant to kind of like point to support the God of the Bible when there's like a long history of considered conflict between this very view and like the biblical conception of God. This is more like starting from Greek thought, and then, then people like Aquinas and them try to reconcile this view with Scripture, because there's at least prima facie conflicts with various things, especially because like the Greeks considered part of greatness to be, neglecting like emotions and, like impassibility and incorrigibility and all this stuff. So yeah, I think it'd be a difficult argument to make that like these things were created to try to get the God of the Bible, considering like there's such a long history of and concern about the conflicts between the two, and
Yeah, but
has
just
led to
as you just put it, so the lack of emotion there is conceived as a property of greatness by the Greeks, but was removed from this list because it doesn't fit with the concept of God. He clearly gets angry. Is described as getting angry a lot in the Bible. He's described as being jealous in the Bible. So all of these emotions wouldn't define a greatest being as per your Greek view of this. So these have been removed because they don't fit with the God of the Bible.
Yeah,
So it's to reconcile that.
A lot of classical theists have like, done various work to like try to reconcile them, come up with all this analogous stuff. I'm more on the theistic personalist side, so I just say, I'm fine with like getting rid of the impassibility and stuff. I think we've made progress in understanding part of what greatness is. I think there's theological progress, moral progress, etc., which I will come back to. Yeah.
Well, so I mean, without dwelling on this for too long, but when you say all good, can you define what good is? Are you looking at it from a specific point of view, a human point of view, or are you just saying just generically whatever is considered good is good?
Yeah, just whatever is good, intrinsically or fundamentally, morally, etc. I mean, I think goodness is like a primitive, so there's no like further analysis of goodness in other terms.
Well, the trolley problem says that's not true, because which
trolley
is the
problem
good
has nothing
answer
to
for
do
the
with
trolley problem? Well, if good is a intrinsic property, one of those two answers should be good, and the other one should be not good. And which one is the good answer?
Excuse me, Blarg. The trolley problem is more so like a psychological question that poses like a really. It's difficult to make a choice in that situation. Like you could say that.
No. Come on, the trolley problem isn't a psychological problem. It's just
it's a classic morality riddle.
Yeah, it's like deontology versus consequentialism.
That's right, and you're trying to find out. You're trying to decide which of these two options is good, or at least the least bad option, in order to give the moral answer. You have to make a judgment on the goodness of your two choices in order to achieve to come up with a choice. And the trolley problem just shows that there are situations where there is no clear answer to that question.
Oh, there's no clear answer.
So it can't be primitive. There can't be a finite answer. It's always context dependent upon what your goals in life are, and how you look at the world.
So the trolley, when I say goodness is a primitive, I guess I'm speaking more about like linguistically, and then whenever we're trying to do like normative theory and we want to figure out what things are good, or like what are the bearers of goodness, and which things are good, is well-being and intrinsically good? Is it intrinsically good to, or is it, or even, I mean, the decision between moral theories is like, do we reason from the good to the right, or the right to the good? They're like kind of, different. Do we have like deontic constraints? So I think, those are different questions that are kind of getting muddled up there. So yeah,
So you would still argue and say the concept of good is a primitive?
yeah, I guess I was really talking about the term good as a primitive. And then yes, I think that there are different things that have the property of goodness. Like probably like well-being, and I think human beings, various non-human animals also all carry like goodness as a property, or
So
at least
I'm not.
moral
I won't
value.
argue. I won't argue against that because I think you can make a case that it is. The question I was really asking was that, okay, let's say that just presuppose that good is a primitive. How do you when you say all good, who is setting up that primitive? Is it because I guess I'm thinking when you say it's a primitive, it's kind of like primitive that's almost context dependent. So from your point of view, when you say something is good, it's a primitive and it's just good. Whereas when God looks at something and says it's good, it may be something that's completely opposite of what you think is good.
I think, I think goodness is just like a property of things, and things possess it or it doesn't, and it's independent of people's like subjective attitudes towards that, which is a good chunk of my presentation. So I think we can clarify the goodness part in a little bit in the next section.
I hope you've got something good to go there, because what I consider good and what, for example, a MAGA considers good, those are very different goods. So fingers crossed. That you've got
Yes.
something a little stronger.
All right. Let's move
Yes.
forward. Go ahead, Alex.
Sounds good. So I'm just gonna give like very broad picture of like where we're going. Okay, starting point, we have moral knowledge of some kind. Okay, if you just have a naturalistic evolutionary picture, then the if there is such thing as a target, then that would be like reproductive fitness. It is at least not the case that it's aiming at true moral beliefs, and there's not any like necessary connection between the two. However, like on theism, God knows these moral truths and wants there to be these moral agents that have knowledge of these moral truths. So there's more likely to be this alignment between our moral beliefs and what the moral truths are on theism than naturalism. And so therefore, I think theism is a better explanation of there being these moral agents with moral knowledge than naturalism. We'll like get into more specifics down the line. But that's
Let's just wait.
overview.
Can just go back. Let's
Yeah.
just have at least kind of a response to these points. Like, for example, at the first point, we have moral knowledge. Okay, that's fine.
So I think it's better if I like, because I'm gonna, go through, we can have like more substantive discussion later. That's just kind of a outline.
Okay, it's just that the second point really got to me because
Yeah.
that is a huge straw man.
Yeah, keen to chew on that one as well. But if you're going to address it specifically, this is a outline of where you go. We can address it specifically when you address that point directly, perhaps.
Yeah. This is just kind
wanted
of like,
to kind of give you a heads up, right? That's
Yeah.
from our point of view.
Yeah.
That's a huge,
Yeah, we'll be leaping all over it.
sounds good. Cool. So this is just kind of like very vague. So I think as a starting point, there's like certain true moral beliefs that we have. So, it's wrong to torture children for fun. This cute little puppy right here, it's wrong to punt them or torch kittens, shoot people for fun.
Is it wrong to torture children for
He's,
not fun?
The dog is protected, so it is okay to punt.
Nice.
Yeah, but is it wrong to torture children if you're not doing it for fun?
For a reason, for example.
maybe that's like a more controversial thing if you're saving 1 billion people. But I guess I just wanted to stick to some these are just candidate, hopefully non-controversial examples. So
No, that puppy looks pretty dangerous.
Yeah. maybe this one in particular should be punted. Can't trust people in hot dog costumes generally.
And
So
I think
No,
he's
that's
got a
absurd.
gun. I think he's got a gun.
Okay.
I would be suspicious of this as well.
Although
So
in any competition, that dog is going to be the wiener.
Oh
So-
God.
nice. There used to be a competition on my campus called Wiener Fest, and there would be a costume competition for wiener dogs, and they'd have races, and it was amazing. But
That sounds adorable.
it was.
Did anyone ever see the video of the person who did like the spider web? It was like at a university somewhere, as a tunnel under somewhere, did a spider web sort of thing. And as a person walks into the tunnel, they call the dog, and the dog's dressed up in a spider costume, comes running in the other end of the tunnel. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Fucking 8-legged dog comes running in. Yeah, brilliant.
All right, so yeah, these can be like modified, contextualized, different things that might make it more controversial, but I think generally these are pretty straightforward. Okay, so then like what kind of moral knowledge we have? This, I guess, will be highly controversial in this crew. So we have
Very much so.
So I want to make the claim, and we'll argue for the position that our moral knowledge is objective. And so I mean something very specific when I say objective. I mean it's true, independent of subjective attitudes of observers towards that truth.
Wait, let me just make a distinction here between moral knowledge and moral truth, right? You could say that there is an objective moral truth, but we may not have knowledge of it.
Right, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm
So knowledge
I-
requires us believing it and us having some justification for it. So
Yeah, well, objective truth is fine. It's a thing that comports with reality, but objective morality, objective moral knowledge implies an objectively moral correct answer to a given question. And as we saw with the trolley problem, it's easy to construct a scenario where there is no objectively moral answer to a given question. So how do we have an objective moral answer if there is no how does objective morality exist in a world where there is no objectively moral answer to a given question?
yeah, I think with the
Because-
trolley problem, there is no obviously correct answer, or there is no answer that is universally agreed upon. But that is not what I mean when I say objective. So I think it doesn't need to be universal, or everyone agrees, or everyone knows these moral truths, and it doesn't need to be like an absolute truth, meaning that it's situation independent. Because, like you said, there are.
But you're saying there's an ontologically objective moral truth. Would that be reasonable to say? And we might not have an epistemological way to get to it.
Like in principle, like that is a thing. Objective truth doesn't require the ability to access it, but I think,
and that's where there's a little bit of fuzziness here, because you're saying objective moral knowledge, not objective moral truth. So how do you have an objective knowledge of that moral truth?
So I really just mean moral knowledge is of the truth is of the objective kind, and so previous
The truth
slide.
can be
to know
objective,
it.
right? The truth can be objective. So there could be an objectively correct answer to the trolley problem, but you don't have an objective knowledge of that truth.
Correct. Yes. And I guess I don't even need to really claim that the trolley problem is such an example that we have moral knowledge that is objective, but I do think things like, slavery is wrong, torturing people for fun is wrong, or
I don't think we have objective knowledge of that.
So I
I don't
Alex,
know that you have demonstrated that objective moral truth exists. So you just assume objective truth exists, And then we can say, well, we might not have knowledge of the objective truth, but it's there. And you go, well, how do we know that it actually exists? How do we know that if we have no way to actually access the objective truth, as demonstrated by the trolley problem, as you said, there may be an objective truth. It may be an objectively moral answer to that trolley problem, but we can't access it. How do we know that it actually exists when you look back at from the other direction? We can't demonstrate that one or the other is best. How do we know that there is a truth to that problem?
Right. I think my question is, if objective truth exists but we can't access it, doesn't that make it indistinguishable from it not existing?
That's probably even a better way to put it.
That is a good way to put it. Yeah.
Well, that just means we don't know it. There's a lot of facts about, the world that we don't know yet. There's a lot of like open research questions that are purely scientific. So like us knowing it doesn't imply that there's not an objective truth, or there's no fact of the matter. It's just, we have some uncertainty.
But our lack of knowledge of it doesn't imply that it does exist either.
Agreed. I am not attempting to argue that we don't know
He sees-
moral truths, therefore it's objective.
But you've claimed that objective moral truth exists. It's one of your, the elements of your proof.
So,
But you haven't been able to demonstrate that.
Right. So I
Can we-
have some arguments for that later. So,
Can we please
Okay.
just let Alex do his presentation without interrupting him every 30 seconds?
so let me clarify just a few more things before that I'm not saying, and then I will give a few arguments that moral truth is objective, or at least there are some objective moral truths. So some of the things that I'm not saying, like in terms of the moral knowledge argument, is that you need to know that God exists in order to have moral knowledge, or to have true moral beliefs, or that you need to believe like certain facts about God, or believe anything about God in order to be able to do morally good things, or to have true moral beliefs. And I'm not claiming in this argument that moral truths are grounded in facts about God's nature. And I'm not saying that without God, like all things are permitted, or any specific, killing people for fun is permitted, or anything like that. Just to clarify that those aren't part of the argument that I'm giving today. So, okay, I think there are some good reasons to accept that morality is objective. So I guess I'll go through these. I think, I don't even list it as an argument, but I think it's relevant perhaps to point out that, the majority of philosophers do accept that morality is objective. They're moral realists. So it's around like 61% of philosophers in like the survey. They surveyed like a bunch of philosophers at different universities. If you look at meta-ethicists specifically, which are the people who specialize in the topic of whether or not morality is objective, and various related inquiries, then it's slightly higher, to 64% of them accept some type of objective morality. Okay,
So
but
Alex, I mean, this is not a reason to accept objective morality. It's
like a higher order reason. Like the people who have studied and thought about this topic, more like probably all else equal, or like a little bit more ready. But I'm happy to admit that it's not the most compelling reason. So I think there's some others I'll go through.
I think there is a survey that says 100% of the philosophers that lean towards moral realism are dumb. That's the survey.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
No, I'm just kidding. I'm actually in the moral realism camp. So, all right.
Great response. So, I think there's a few arguments I'll get into. So one, I meant to animate these, but okay. So this comes from David Enoch. So he calls it the spinach test. So this is just kind of like an intuition pump, rather than like a really, really strict argument, but I'll just go through the hypothetical he considers. So, consider you're talking to your your kid Timmy, and you want Timmy to eat his spinach, and you're like, yeah, little Timmy, eat your spinach, blah blah blah, and Timmy's like, nah, spinach is gross, I don't like it, I hate it. And then he's like, yeah, actually, I'm really glad that I don't like spinach. And I'm like, why? Why are you glad that you don't like spinach? And he says, well, if I like spinach, then I'd eat it. And and that's and and it's like, I hate that because then I'd eat spinach, and spinach is gross and that's yucky. And it's like, okay. Um so so what so just like to analyze that situation, um in the hypothetical he is considering, where he likes spinach, he has removed all of his reasons to not eat spinach, and yet he still says like, oh, that'd be yucky. And so that's kind of like a mildly entertaining scenario.
Alex, you
Then
know
this
that
is
this
a
is actually an argument against moral realism, don't you?
well, this is like an aesthetic property case. So no. But if you consider a different domain, so that this was in the aesthetic domain, this was in like a taste. So if we consider, the same type of thing with like geocentrism, so if we talk about like, well, I'm really glad that I don't live in the Middle Ages or whatever, because then I believe that like the sun revolves around the earth, and that'd be stupid because that belief is dumb. Then like, okay, that's no longer like remotely a funny type of scenario, because it's just like, yeah, like that would just be dumb. You'd just be wrong. Now, if we consider like a third scenario where it's talking about, well, I'm really glad I don't live in like the 1600s or 1700s or whatever, because then I might end up being a slave owner, and I'd hate that because like that'd be wrong, that'd be gross, dumb, etc. Um, so in the slavery case, is that more like the spinach case or the earth case? So in the spinach case, like I said, in the case where you've come to like spinach, you no longer don't have any like real objection to not eating spinach. And the kid was like, oh, but that's still yucky. And the same thing, and then it's like the exact opposite is the case in geocentrism and slavery. Just because like I live in a time where I have like, you know, where it would be normal and expected to believe like these very wrong things, I would not have removed all of my reason for objecting to the wrong view. So this is a kind of like, I don't know, intuition pump about suggesting that slavery is kind of more like, an objective fact rather than an aesthetic preference type of fact. So that's just like intuition pumped. Then there's more considerations about moral disagreement. So this is pretty standard argument against moral realism that I think is not very good. But when we analyze the nature of moral disagreements, I think it pretty quickly points towards objective moral knowledge. So the first point is that there is genuine moral disagreement. So, I mean, this is more so a counter to a specific kind of view, like an emotivist view, where morality is just like an expression of emotions or something. So if saying torture is wrong just means to say like boo torture, and saying torture is good is just to express like yay torture, then if I'm saying torture is wrong, you saying torture is right, then we're not actually having a disagreement. We're just expressing some emotions. So the fact that we do know that we are actually having genuine moral disagreement suggests that like at least morality is not just an expression of emotions, for example. And it's in principle resolvable, and So yeah, I guess to talk about that a little bit. So yeah, I mean we can give like reasons. We give reasons in our moral discourse, and sometimes that disagreement is resolved actually at the lower level, like the empirical level. So like, okay, we agree suffering is bad, but like, for some of the slavery disagreement might have been like, okay, well, they don't actually feel suffering or whatever. So that's like an empirical disagreement that manifests as like a moral disagreement or whatever. So that's like one way to resolve some of the disagreement. And I think kind of neuters some of like the argument from disagreement against objective morality, because of the because it's actually just turns out to be empirical in nature. And we
How
can
do we
appeal
know that
to
it's been? How do we know that the disagreement has been resolved?
so I guess, how do we know when it's been resolved? I mean, I think like we can I think that comes from like the weight of reasons. So we're always going to end up in um, positions where like people disagree, but the resolution just comes from like the actual assessment of reasons being in the favor of one action or another action or something like that. And ultimately this is going to like ultimately this is going to end up terminating in intuitions of some kind, similar to like every other philosophical position. Yeah, so it's not like there's a moral fact detector that's like some empirical box that I can build. You do some reflective equilibrium and reach an equilibrium between like our theoretical and pre-theoretical intuitions about like specific cases versus like more theoretical judgments. And then, so ultimately like it terminates in the resolution of disagreement where there is like agreement. I mean, I think that is the
I mean,
idea
you're
of
so
disagreement.
Alex. I mean, it just seems like you're doing a lot of hand waving here. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but are you trying to say basically reason will lead to the proper resolution of these disagreements?
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, I mean, and we have reason to think that like there's epistemic benefits of disagreement where like disagreement ends up kind of like on a march towards truth. That's like basically, why I'm here today is I think that we have this disagreement, which I think is going to increase the chance that we are progressing towards truth as we see flaws in maybe in my arguments, maybe in your arguments, in our thinking, such that we get closer to the truth by seeing where our reasons are misguided or misaligned or whatever.
Right, but you considered that you know what is moral, and you've put in sufficient reason to know what is moral, right?
Sufficient to hopefully be like rational or yeah, but I probably could do more. I mean, there's a reason why I'm active in like reading papers on ethics, because I definitely don't have it all figured out, and there's definitely flaws in my thinking. And so reading people making arguments against my positions is one way that I can help get closer to the truth by seeing the flaws in my own position, for example.
But for someone who thinks like homosexuality is immoral, you're saying that their deficiency, or you might say the person who thinks that homosexuality is moral, whichever way you're going to end up, you think one of those groups just haven't put in enough reason to come to the correct objective moral truth, right?
Yeah, defining put in enough reason a certain way, like, yes, they haven't like properly thought through the issue, or like the systematization of their intuitions is faulty, or yeah, they might just have wrong intuitions, which I think are something that can kind of be trained.
Okay, so you're
Okay.
this is you where you're arguing against
if
the
my
existence
intuition
of God,
says
right? So Alex, because it sounds like you're kind of arguing against the existence of God because of these moral truths, because you're saying that we can get to those moral truths with reason, not with prayer, not with appealing to God, but through reason, our own faculties.
Yeah, I guess that's why I clarified that I'm not trying to argue that, we need God to reveal moral truths or something. So,
this was sort of the concern that I had from what our conversation last week, which is you and I can both get to the same place scientifically, and now it would appear that we can get to the same place morally, but you're insisting that we add a step, which is include God. And I keep saying, but if we can get to the same place without that step, then your God is unnecessary.
yeah, I'm not trying to argue that theism would entail that like we come to an agreement or something like that. I do think, in the same way that like it takes a long time period sometimes for certain truths to, I guess, reveal themselves to us, whether scientifically, mathematically, morally, etc. So I guess it's not really surprising that that maybe like we haven't resolved some of these disagreements right now. I think that they will be no less than I think scientific truths will be resolved for open research questions and questions that we haven't even begun to think of. And maybe the convergence isn't even as efficient as it is in science, and maybe the agreement at the end is still going to be less than it is in a scientific context. I don't think that's particularly surprising. I don't think that really says anything about the nature of the truth, except that it's it's a different domain relying on different kinds of evidence, and that's okay.
Got a question about your ability to get there via reason. Would you agree or disagree that a person who is a psychopath is capable of reason?
I'm sure they're capable of reason. I suspect that yeah, I guess they're more faulty on the like intuition part, or is it the motivation part? Psychopaths are the ones that they have don't they have moral knowledge? It's just not motivational to them. They just don't care.
They have no empathy of any kind towards other people.
Right, so they're
they
lacking
don't,
in the motivation. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't feel anything wrong with harming another person. It doesn't cause any moral pain, I suppose, discomfort to them to stab a person in the chest for $5. That is not harmful to them. It doesn't feel uncomfortable. This is the far end of the scale. It is a scale of not everybody's that far along, but would you consider them capable of rational thought?
Yeah, I would think
Spectrum.
so. And I would think, they could even have moral knowledge, but yeah, they're just like a psychological deficiency there.
How would you think that you would be able to resolve a moral question with someone who feels exactly zero empathy towards a harm that they might cause to another person? So, for example, if the question was, don't torture children for fun, what way would you argue that that's a morally bad thing to do, and come to an agreement? If, for example, we take the rest of society out, so we can. So I'm taking the rest of society out of this equation because if you're going to make the argument that it would lead to them ending up in jail, and that's something that they don't want, that's a natural argument, not an underlying truth argument. That's a consequences argument. So if you take out that component of it, and you've just got two people sitting on a desert island, the only two people alive in the universe, and one of them is a psychopath and the other one is you, how do you conceive that you could resolve the moral question about that specific problem?
Well, I was thinking that we agreed that psychopaths have moral knowledge, just not motivation. I don't think I can argue someone into being motivated to be moral, but I do think.
But why would they think that it's wrong to do if they enjoy it? You know, what's wrong about it?
Yeah,
Well,
I think
How would
Blarg, if I could take a stab at sort of rewording the question slightly. To the sociopath, to the psychopath, it's what they're not behaving in an immoral manner. So this moral knowledge that you're purporting doesn't exist to them.
Is that right? I mean, I think they recognize that, you know, they just don't care.
No. They recognize the result of what would happen. So, for example, it's possible for a psychopath, and I had a conversation with a person who said that they were a diagnosed psychopath and that they had been in counseling since they were 8 in order to remain out of jail, because what they like is they like their life the way it is. They don't want to go to jail. So they've had to construct an artificial moral framework to allow them to exist in our society. So they don't have a moral intuition that it's bad to kill someone or that it's bad to torture someone. They have a moral intuition that they don't want to be locked up. So as a result, they use that as their motivation to create a facsimile of morality that allows them to achieve what they do want, which is to remain free. So that they have absolutely no moral intuition that this thing is bad, other than because of the consequences of society's reaction to them.
So all psychopaths are consequentialists. I think that's the point.
That might be true.
Hey, could I just jump in? I'm gonna have to go in 15 minutes. It's really late for me.
Yeah.
Right. I have 2 things I wanna blur about before I pass out. For Blarg there, I think you could resolve that, probably with an adoption of a Kantian framework. Are you familiar with Immanuel Kant?
Only a little, yes.
Only a little bit. Okay, so if you employ a Kantian framework, it is notoriously within metaethics known for being extremely unemotivist. Like it's no emotions at all. Kant did not like emotions at all. So his categorical imperative, which is what it's called, is solely based on reason alone. So you could come to moral truths or like normatively binding conclusions based purely on reason, and you don't need intuitions for it. You don't need moral intuitions for it. You just arrive there purely on the facts of reason alone. And my question for Alex, would you say that a Kantian framework is probable on an atheistic worldview?
Wait, his like metaethical views?
Yeah, like a categorical imperative. Do you think it's how do I put this? Sorry, English isn't my first or second language.
Really, you speak very well.
Yeah.
God, I forgot the word. Like, do you think it's possible to ground a Kantian metaethical framework on metaphysical naturalism?
Yeah, I guess I think I probably need to do a deeper dive into. I know there's like there's like a lot of different, Kantian constructivism. What that's yeah. Anyway, yeah. I think I probably should just say I'm not sure.
That's fair enough. I
but
think it was. God, what's his name?
doesn't Scanlon do the whole Kantian constructivism?
Hold on. What's his name? Kenny Pierce. You know Kenny Pierce, right?
Mm,
Yeah, there's an interview with him. I don't know. Maybe I could find it and send it to you. Where he's just like, yeah, atheism has no issues with objective morality because they can just employ a Kantian framework and it
yeah.
it works. Maybe not as good as it does on theism, but it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, it works.
Anyways, I probably would say that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
think-
have to dip. It is 4:20 a.m. And I
Thanks
have
for joining.
I have a lab report to write tomorrow, so I'm
Oh
gonna
my God.
pass out.
That's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Hey,
Nice.
Shard, would you mind telling us like what when you say lab report, is it for like which sciences
Uni
or
physics.
science? Oh,
Physics.
physics. Oh, okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, I'll talk to you later,
Yeah,
Alex.
thanks for joining.
All right.
Sounds
All
good.
right, thanks,
Ciao.
Great
Richard.
conversation, man. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome to come back anytime.
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Yeah, let me
Would
just
you-
say on the con side. So, I mean, first of all, he's a theist. You know, he believes in God. You know, he has the whole noumena phenomena distinction. So he explicitly says that you can't know the noumena, right? So you can't have direct access to these truths. But he does say that your things are moral if it is motivated by reason and not from emotions or anything else besides your reason. And it's not that it just comports with something being moral. So you could save someone, but if you did it because of emotions, let's say because you felt good for saving someone, then even though the action itself is moral, it isn't a moral action in the sense that it wasn't driven by reason. So that's what he would say.
A question, QC. Do you think Kant would be able to resolve that scenario I'm talking of? I discussed the hypothetical of two people.
Which one?
Which one now?
The
please.
hypothetical of two people sitting on an island.
Oh no, I thought you were gonna do the other.
No, screw you guys.
I don't want to die from alcohol poisoning.
No, stuffed a lot of you. You're not getting drunk off me that easily.
Talk about a spirited conversation.
Yeah.
Oh,
Being that the in that rational discussion, there's certain assumptions about what people would agree to, and I don't know that it necessarily follows that a person who is a psychopath would logically agree to the statements of a person who is not, when it comes to reasoning out morality when it doesn't have a consequential outcome.
So,
for Kant, the consequence has no bearing. So as long as you do it based on reason, even if 1 billion people die, it's still a moral action. So it's like the exact opposite of consequentialism.
Mm.
So so you're talking about it's possible to have this moral knowledge. If a vegan and I are talking about veganism, then which one of us has the moral knowledge, and how do we determine that?
Would it be the one on the trolley?
Yes, there it is.
Sorry.
That comment was trolley awful.
okay, you didn't say it, so we're good. You didn't say it.
Yeah. So again, Alex, this idea of it's possible to ultimately know what is moral, even in something as simple as veganism versus non-veganism.
Why do you think that's simple? Why do you think that's a simple question?
Because either it's moral to use the byproduct of animals or it's not.
Yeah, that's every
One of us.
question.
So in order for somebody to be right in that conversation, the opposing side would have to give up something fundamental that they perceive to be true. Either it's moral to use the byproducts of animals or it's not. You can't halfway vegan and halfway unvegan.
Well, there's reducitarian views where
So I'm not familiar with that phrase. What,
the
reducitarian?
moral, well, it's add an ism to like what it sounds like. The moral obligation is to at least like reduce your animal
Right,
meat
but
intake or something.
right, but reduce. Okay, all right. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. But that's still me holding the moral view that it's okay to use animal byproducts, and the vegan is still holding that it is immoral. So we can't come to an agreement on the fundamental moral nature without one of us giving up a position. And so
Yes.
how do we determine in your metric, in your rubric, how do we determine which one of us has the superior knowledge?
So if we know like how much, suffering of this animal is caused by my consuming of their animal products, and we know the value of like freedom of choice in this moral theory. So the disagreement is going to be like between I mean, I would say between moral theories. There's also like anti-theory views that are particularist. I mean, there's plenty of people that think the question of veganism is super obvious. I mean, I don't think it's super obvious. I don't really even need to say that like there is a fact of the matter about veganism. I mean, I think there is. I think it's going to be person dependent, based on a variety of factors. I really only need to.
Objective rather than objective.
Sorry, what?
Yeah,
That would
person
make it
dependent
subjective rather
means
than objective,
means that there isn't a resolvable answer.
which then would negate your core premise.
So I think I showed a slide where I distinguished objective and absolute and universal. It doesn't depend on like what the person believes about or desires about the moral correctness of veganism or consuming animal products or whatever, but it might depend on something like, I mean, well, an obvious example would just be like dietary needs incompatible with veganism or something
Sure,
like
which
that.
is a subjective situation.
But if we assume that we can get all of our dietary needs without needing to consume any animal product, and that'd be true in this modern era, then that takes away that particular argument, and you get to the question of whether the morality we should be considering is a human-centric view of morality or a sentient being-centric view of morality. Which one of those is correct has to be the question that gets asked to be able to decide which is correct, veganism or not.
Right.
And how do you do that?
So, I mean, I think the answer is reflective equilibrium. I think that's like the method. So the method, like broadly speaking, is, you take your theoretical intuitions and you look at like all of their entailments, and then you also look at your pre-theoretical intuitions. And so these would be things like specific cases. So for example, I look at like, I don't know, an animal's like, throat being cut and it squeals as it slowly bleeds out its life. That looks like it's morally bad. So that's like a particular intuition. And
let's
then
go even further than that, though. Let's assume that creature suffers infinite torturous pain in order to provide the thing that we want from it, does that, at that point, is that still wrong? Because unless you decide that that its suffering is important enough to, its suffering matters at all, then a tiny bit of suffering versus infinite suffering is irrelevant.
Right, yeah. So like if animals suffer infinitely, or like, you know, pigs, or pick a particular one that's factory farmed or whatever, if that constitutes infinitely bad suffering or infinite suffering or whatever, then yeah, I guess it would seem to trivially follow that at least you couldn't eat, you know, bacon and ham or whichever animal. So I think that would be the answer if you appeal, if the correct thing is to appeal to infinite harm in that situation.
Well,
I doubt that would be the case, but
well, let's
yeah.
just switch that slightly to the infinite suffering of a human in hell as an example to people who might consider not acting in a particular way. Wouldn't the corollary be that that is morally wrong as well?
Yes. So if there's an infinite hell, then doing things that would result in people going there would be wrong. Yes.
And now we have a major problem with the conclusion of your argument, because the being that's being argued for has this in place.
I'm
then
talking about a omni creator of the universe. I guess I'm not specifically like any type of like entailments about hell.
Okay.
Yeah, but ultimately you are trying to argue towards the Christian God's position, and the hell is a characteristic of that. Hell would necessarily be a good in the Christian ethos. It must exist as a good.
Right.
So the infinite torture of a sentient being is good.
And even if
I don't think we need to get into the Christian aspect of it.
Yeah. So
But
even if we take the
Alex
Christian
limited it.
element, even if we take the Christian
But
element out,
ultimately that's where it leads.
Right.
I mean,
No, and I'm not
in
suggesting you are, but
in
even if we de-Christian the some of the vocabulary here, if we don't have a system of reward and punishment for adhering to the objective moral standards of this deity, then there is ultimately no reason to follow the objective moral standard of this deity. So there has to be a heaven-like structure or a hell-like structure to reward or punish those that follow and don't follow the objective moral standard. Wouldn't there be?
I mean, if you take that view, I mean, yeah, like I think that the fact that theism entails ultimate justice is a reason to prefer the existence of God, in the sense of, yeah, it would be better if God exists because there would be ultimate justice in whatever way, like justice turns out to
Right,
be
but then we're
correct.
right back to the existence of, for lack of a better term, heaven and hell.
If that's the right view of justice, then yes. Which, if that's the right view of
But
justice, though, then it
wouldn't
would
our
be.
moral intuition tell us whether or not that is the right view?
I mean, yeah, I think. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So I'm kind of working on two parallels here. One is that if objective moral standards exist as dictated by your deity, then ultimate reward or punishment has to follow as the outcome of your level of adherence to that moral standard. Otherwise, there's no point in having the moral standard.
Well, I didn't really say anything about the moral truths being dictated by God. I'm, not trying to make that argument.
Then what's the arbiter then of good and evil?
I guess there's just moral facts. There's reality that. Do you mean like about reward and punishment? Is that what you're asking
Sure,
about?
because again, if there's no arbiter and there's no if there's no arbiter and there's no reward or punishment, then you functionally negated the existence of objective morality.
Well, the am I just going to use the atheist argument against you here without if you need God to be motivated to,
Sure,
then
which goes right back to my premise earlier that you and I come to the same moral conclusions. I just don't need that extra domino, but you're saying that extra domino must exist. But now you're arguing that extra domino doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, because I'm giving a different argument than what I think are like bad arguments, I guess.
So I guess what it ultimately comes down to is if a deity is the arbiter of how well you adhered to the objective moral truths, it necessarily follows that there must be an ultimate reward or an ultimate punishment. And if that's the case, then again, I'm only using the word hell because I just don't have a better term, but that means that hell must exist.
Yeah,
but you just argued that, but you just argued that hell, the existence of hell, would be an ultimately immoral act.
Yeah, I mean, because you just gave some assumptions that would trivially make it follow that it would be perfectly fine.
Right, but there have been a lot of trivial assumptions that we've been making throughout the course of this conversation. We were fine with those, but we're not fine with these. I guess so then if we take hell and heaven out, then, and if we take the arbiter of objective moral standards out, it doesn't follow then that you functionally negated the existence of objective moral standards?
So
on a functional level?
I think, well, one way to think about, which is one way to understand like what is morally right is to do that which you have most reason to do, which is a concept, like understanding that I would agree with. Then I guess like you have then doing the right thing would be, yeah, just doing what you have most reason to do. So
I have most reason to kick a puppy.
Yeah, I think like that's a pretty implausible assessment of your reasons.
It came at me, I was scared.
Yeah, is that what you actually think, or are you just making stuff up?
I'm giving a somewhat absurd example here, but to go back to anchor it into something a little bit more plausible. We talked about psychopaths and sociopaths and how they fundamentally process the world around them. And so your objective moral standard would need to pierce that understanding. Otherwise, it's what we agree upon as being objectively moral, because the psychopaths and the sociopaths are never going to have that same innate understanding.
Yeah, some people might not like. Yeah, I don't mean to say that. I don't really need to say that everyone has moral knowledge. Maybe psychopaths don't have moral knowledge, and
should they be held accountable for that, though, either in this life or the next?
So let's see. Probably, yeah. I mean, I think they're probably have something that's wrong, but I guess like, yeah, I guess my
because now you're punishing somebody for not adhering to a moral standard that they never stood a chance of understanding.
So my core claim is that, you know, we have not, that at least there is moral knowledge, objective moral knowledge, which doesn't entail that like everyone has moral knowledge. And yeah, and I think theism is the best explanation of like there being any moral knowledge, or at least as much as we have. Maybe we would expect there to be even more or something. But I guess like to the extent that we do have it, I think theism is a better explanation. Yeah.
But the problem with the theist point of view is that you have to have that ultimate being, that ultimate maximal being that is the arbiter of morality. Otherwise, everything is subjective because everything is agreed upon by the group, not just one singular being.
Sure. I mean, if that's true, then I guess that means God does exist. Thank you.
But then
On the other side was your statement that it makes more sense if morality exists, that a being like it can't be explained by naturalism, because naturalism is only about survival of the fittest essentially, and thus can't get to morality. I did argue that correct. That is your position, isn't it?
Well, I guess I haven't really quite formulated it quite yet. Let me just try to jump through, and then we can get there. I'll speed along here to get through that. I think another relevant difference about moral disagreement is like it's not faultless. Like in aesthetic disagreement, I say, okay, you like vanilla ice cream, I like strawberry ice cream. I don't say like, oh wow, like you're making some mistake, but you know, oh, you think genocide is okay, I think genocide's fine. Oh, that's okay, we can just go on our separate ways, you know. I think there's clearly a mistake happening in like this type of thing. And I think that is kind of best explained by like there being an objective moral truth, for example. I think like moral progress and moral reform would be more examples. So, like if moral facts or like what's moral is set by like what the individual or society thinks, then moral reformers are kind of like basically doing something wrong because they're opposing what the morally correct thing is, and they yeah, so like uh, and that seems pretty bizarre. So like an objective moral fact is a better explanation of why moral reform is actually good, or explains why moral progress is a thing, because that implies change towards some, you know, towards some goal or objective or something that is positive in some way. Positive with respect to what? Well, the objective moral truth believer has an answer for that makes a lot of sense, which is closer to the objective moral truth. So Michael Huemer gives some like examples with respect to like reduction in war and violence, and you know different things like, you know, slavery and different things. So it's like it's a liberal realist answer is his type of thought. So I think these are like best explained. And then okay, so this is the last actual argument for objective moral facts, which is based on objective epistemic facts, because we should think that there are objective epistemic facts. So I'm basing off of Terence Cuneo's argument. So things like believing things in accordance with evidence, not believing in contradictions, committing logical fallacies, being charitable. These are things that we should do, even if I don't want to. Even if I really wanted to commit a bunch of logical fallacies, I should not, in fact, do that. And so it'd be somewhat surprising if like there's all these facts like this about what I should believe, or even like things like gathering evidence, but not about like how I should act. So I think like this is best explained by there being objective moral facts. So yeah, they kind of go together. There's objective normativity. So that I think concludes my case for like the objective moral knowledge or objective moral facts part. And I guess like combined with the examples of candidate moral knowledge, I think, you know, some of those are good candidates for being these objective moral facts. So that's like
Can
the
you
first
go
part.
to slide 10?
Yes. Which slide is this? This.
Yeah. So it's interesting, like you make those 3 points, 1 to 3, and your conclusion is that the best explanation is that it's subjective. It's to me, it doesn't follow.
Okay, well, I thought I gave reasons to think that.
I mean, you gave explanations of why, but none of that explanation led to, oh, that means morality is subjective.
So, yeah, I guess there's some like when you make a mistake, the mistake in reasoning would be something having to do with like true falsity, factivity, because otherwise, otherwise I guess like, you know,
So
it's
I
like
just feel like
aesthetic.
it's kind of a non sequitur conclusion. So, for example, let's kind of translate this into like an ontology and say, in terms of like, let's say, like objective reality. So there is, we can say there's genuine disagreements of our perception. You know, each of us may perceive things differently, and in principle, it can be resolved, right? We can kind of figure out ways which one is truth. And these disagreements are not, you know, we could say it's not faultless. You know, that, you know, there is a rationale, right, where someone might perceive something to be different. But then you can't take those three and say, oh, therefore there's an objective reality. So
How
I
do
kind of
I
see this as something similar, where you're kind of talking about sort of these different moral aspects, and then you say because of that, that means that morality is objective.
and how do I resolve perceptual disagreement?
I'm just saying that those 3 points wouldn't necessarily lead you to that conclusion to say, therefore, objective reality.
Oh, well, you gave a candidate counterexample, but I guess I'm questioning the second premise on the candidate counterexample.
Which is the second premise? Which do you mean?
The in principle resolvability of perceptual disagreements.
Yeah, so I mean, just because we can resolve a disagreement doesn't necessarily mean that there is an objective reality. It just means that we can come to an agreement of what our perceptions are. So similarly on the moral side, just because we can in principle resolve it doesn't mean that we got to some moral truth. We just came to an agreement.
Which
Yeah, we
then
could be
makes it
completely
subjective.
wrong. We might have agreed that it's best to run over the 5 people on the trolley.
Yeah.
Is that the correct answer? And go ahead, everyone, have a drink.
Asshole!
Yeah, I think that would not meet the faultless criterion.
Well, how do we know? How do we know that it's not faultless?
Well, because we know that running people over is not good.
No, it just means that you disagreed with these other 2 people. So it goes to 2 where, you know, it just hasn't been resolved yet.
I mean, do you think running people over is okay?
So it's
No, I
okay.
don't think so.
In neither option can you avoid running a person over.
Are you talking about the trolley problem? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
we got back
so
there.
Yeah, we're
there's
back to
things
the-
like, yeah,
back
so
to
some
control.
things are unclear. That doesn't mean that it can't be resolved. Yeah, but I think, yeah, so I think we have not yet resolved our disagreement about the argument from disagreement, but we might want to, well, actually, I mean, I guess there is still the self-undermining component of it, because, like, okay, do we think that our disagreement we're having right now can be resolved? Like, do you think that I'm wrong?
No, but we could resolve it, right? We could resolve it and say, okay, I agree with you that it is wrong to let 5 people get rolled over by a trolley. So we all have the same answer to that problem, but that doesn't, say that there is that morality in itself is objective.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't follow. You're right, QC. I didn't see it that way, but that's exactly right. It doesn't follow.
I think
that you get to objective from an agreement.
Yeah, I think it would not be an entailment from coming to an agreement in the sense of we just believe the two things. I agree with that. I
Yeah, I mean,
think
there
that,
is a presupposition. It goes back to the whole moral truth and moral knowledge. There's a presupposition in the first three that there is a moral truth that you're getting to, that everyone can get to. But that presupposition is just built into this. So if you take that presupposition, yeah, you could argue that you got to 4, but without that presupposition, you don't get to 4.
I mean, I think it's like the consideration of what we actually think about, how moral disagreements go, give us the experience of 1, 2, and 3, and then the inference from that to 4, that moral disagreement is relevantly different from expressions of aesthetic preference or the expressions of emotions, and is more like expressions of scientific disagreement where people make mistakes. But I don't think whether we're going to resolve this right now. Maybe
Ironically.
yeah.
Well, so I mean, this, and we've been bringing this up over and over. So this is the reason why people use the trolley agreement, because the trolley problem, because it's easy for people to agree on things that are agreeable, right? We can all agree that we should not kick little puppies, and we should not shoot little puppies just because they act like little puppies, right? We can all agree on that. But when it gets to things that are a little more difficult to resolve, that's where the issue is. That's where you kind of see whether your moral views make sense or not. If you can resolve these dilemmas, then you have a more, I guess, a tighter argument than to say, well, my morality is right because my morality says that killing is wrong. It's like you getting to morality of saying killing is wrong and raping is wrong or child molestation is wrong, that got you nothing. But if you get to a problem where you can satisfactorily resolve these dilemmas, then you know that you have something.
Except
Well,
not even then necessarily, because
yeah, not necessarily. I agree.
Because the resolvability question could just simply be a factor of groupthink, not of truth.
I don't
How do you,
really have to
how do you lay
say
it?
anything about like the trolley problem, or because like all of these the various candidates that you mention as being like unclear, like maybe there is no fact of the matter in those cases. Like I think there is, but it wouldn't really be a problem for my argument that there's no fact of the matter for the trolley problem, for example. I mean, maybe that's like doesn't make for a great unified theory if some things that look like moral disagreements have facts and some don't. But I really only need to say that there are some objective moral facts, and we know some of these. And maybe the trolley problem is one of those, maybe we don't. So I guess
But the
I
problem
don't
is that
think-
we don't know, right? We don't know that truth.
which
I mean,
truth?
that goes back to my point about the noumena and the phenomena. Kant would say that you don't know that the noumena. You don't know
Wait,
that
which truth are
moral
you
truth.
talking about?
The moral truth.
With well, yeah.
So
I
you're
guess I'm
saying that
like
there
in the
is a
trolley
moral truth.
problem, in the trolley problem, like I don't need to defend a certain answer to the trolley problem to say that there are objective moral facts that we know. Like maybe there is none for the trolley problem, for all I'm concerned with.
But if there's a moral problem that doesn't have an answer, then it means that the statement that objective morality exists can't be true.
Sure it can. It's just
because
that the trolley
there
problem
should be an
dilemma
answer
is
to every
not a
moral
monotone.
problem.
Well, just because there's an answer to, just because there's not an answer to one wouldn't mean that there's not an answer to any of them.
No,
Just
not
'cause-
saying. Just because there's an answer to one question doesn't mean that objective that the whole category is objective. It's a little
Yeah,
bit
sure. I
like
only need to
argue.
say that there is like one objective moral truth. I think that's like still better explained by theism.
The problem that I've sort of that I'm coming to is it sort of comes back to what we were talking about earlier, which I can get to the same basic understanding of reality and its existence without the necessity of a deity. And you and I can come to what I'm certain is an agreement on the vast majority of moral issues, but I can come to it without the necessity of a deity. And the arguments and the structure that you've put forth would seem to either make objective morality either unknowable or functionally irrelevant. But these are two core pieces of your argument for the existence of morality, and that morality is a core argument for the existence of a deity. And what I've not seen is how any of these things really link together in any functional way, especially considering that you and I can come to the exact same conclusions, only without a deity necessarily propping them up.
Right, I agree. I have not shown that really in the slightest. But here's where I think it does matter here's where I think this comes in, is certain properties of knowledge, or at least the justification is that knowledge needs to be safe or something in that's like a technical term here. So I guess like philosophers have considered knowledge to be justified true belief for a very long time, starting with Plato. So it needs to, you only know things if it's a true thing, if you believe it to be true, and you have some justification for believing it. But then this dude Gettier came along, I think it was 1964, and was like, nope, that's not the case. You're missing something. So he said, he didn't give this example, but this is an easy one. So if I'm looking at this clock, unbeknownst to me, the clock that I had on my desk ran out of batteries the day before, or whatever it's run by. So it's a broken clock. It froze at let's see, 12 or 11:50 in this case, noon, whatever you want to say. And so I'm looking at the clock. The clock says noon, but the clock is broken. Clocks right twice a day. Broken clocks right twice a day. But it just so happens that it actually is noon. So do I actually know that it's noon by looking at a broken clock when it just so happens to be the correct time? I think the usual answer to this is the answer is no, you do not know, because you just kind of got lucky. Your justification was accidental. So what we need some type of like anti-luck condition to add to knowledge. There's different ways of putting this. Doesn't really matter exactly how we do it, but here's one such proposal. It's called safety nearby possible worlds where some subject S believes P is true. So yeah, if you believe P in these other worlds, then like it's true in these other worlds. There's like similar kind of conditions, it's just something about in nearby possible worlds, like you didn't just get lucky and you're like little island of possible worlds around you where it's like different, totally different. Your beliefs might have been different, or the truth might have been different in these others. Then that's not a good look for knowledge. So the primary concern, I think, on a naturalistic evolutionary picture is that our moral beliefs don't exhibit this type of like anti-luck guarantee on our beliefs. So this is like so this is the basis for the evolutionary debunking argument that our evolutionary history is highly contingent. We might have evolved very differently, so our moral beliefs, intuitions might have ended up, very different. So, so there's these evolutionary forces that influence our
So,
cognitive
Alex,
faculties.
before you continue on, I think this is kind of a new line of argument that's going to probably take us another, half an hour to go
Yeah,
through. But
it's going to take some chewing.
yeah, so I don't know what your schedule is for next week, if you want to come back, or if you want to schedule this for some other time.
Maybe some other time.
Okay.
We'll have to message about it. I'll probably
Yeah.
be busy for a bit, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But before we go, Blarg, at the beginning you were mentioning some video of like, what was it, with the dog dressed up or something? Was that right, Blarg? Or
Sorry, I had you muted.
yeah.
Yes, a dog. It's a prank of a
Okay.
dog in a tunnel.
Okay, so I wanted to show something, but I didn't want to interrupt. But this will be our palate cleanser as we kind of close for the day. And thanks, Alex, for coming on. Very interesting discussion. And I know Shar must be sleeping, unlike Craig. I'll have to thank him for coming on. And of course, it was very fun. Oh, was that a wiener? I heard a wiener dog barking.
No, it's a poodle.
Oh, it's a food. Okay.
Well, close enough.
All right, and thanks everyone in the chat, and I'll close off with this. Hope you guys. Well, yeah.
Before we go,
I'll come back after, but watch this.
Psycho killer. Qu'est-ce que c'est?
oh my God! No!
That's awesome.
What's that? When I saw it, I just like laughed.
No way! You did
That's great.
It looked exactly like little Chucky's coming at you.
I don't know about objective morality, but that is objectively marvelous.
Yes.
So that one, I think you'll be okay with kicking, because they definitely had a weapon in their hand.
Yeah, that's one time you probably can't justify it.
Nice.
Alex, I do want to point out, and I've mentioned this before, but it is no small task to come on here, and I think if you can survive 3 separate conversations with jerks like me and some of the other folks, I think you're going to do just fine when it ultimately comes down to defending your dissertation.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on again. Lots of fun.
Yep. All right. We'll see you guys all again. And
before we go, I got one thing for Blarg.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn my camera on just for a moment. 1 second here. Blarg, let me turn it. This is for you, you asshole.
Good on you, Steve-O.
Well done, Steve.
That was fun. All right. See you, everyone. Thanks a lot.
See you guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.